I got my first string bass. I was just telling Glenn Moore this. I bought it, and I just sat in a room and looked at it for an hour.
Oh, really?
Looking at the shapes and smelling it and singing. Fell in love right there with just the instrument itself.
Welcome to another episode of Contrabass Conversations, your show covering life on the low end of the spectrum. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we are chatting today with David Gage. And David has been in the music business, in the double bass business for decades. He's a friend of the ISB. He's a great supporter of the ISB. He's been on the ISB board twice, and it was wonderful to get a chance to take a few minutes and catch up with David and go into the history of the Gage shop. So we talk about studying with Dave Holland in 1976. That's kind of how David got going. Working with Chuck Traeger, the origins of the shop, getting into making products and services like the trunks, and by the way, why he calls trunks a no thanks product. Being a part of the bass revolution these last few years, and just being a fan of the bass in general. David's a great guy. He's done so many significant things for the bass world. He really is a great supporter, and it was wonderful to catch up with him. Before we dive into our conversation with David, I'd like to thank D'Addario Strings, which, by the way, were a major sponsor for ISB 2017. They sponsored the After Hours events, and it was great chatting with Lyris and Sabrina and the other folks in the D'Addario team, walking around with my Kaplan shirt, getting some good photo ops. And by the way, I use Kaplans these days, and they work great. They're great under the bow. They're great pizzicato strings, and they're used by folks like Gary Carr, Gabriele Raggiante, and so many other artists. You can enter for a chance to win a set of Kaplan strings at contrabassconversations.com/strings. I'd also like to thank the Bass Violin Shop, which offers a great line of bass accessories. If you are looking for gadgets and accessories like pickups, strings, bow cases, wheels, bass covers, mutes, quivers, rosin, polish, whatever, they've got it. Go to bassviolinshop.com and pick up your gear. Okay, here we go with our conversation featuring David Gage.
Are you hoarse by the end of one of these things?
Yes,
or are you
hoarse.
okay? Yeah, that's like the primary, not primary, but that's like a major goal for me.
Right.
I get enthusiastic and I talk loud, and then I'm like gone by the time it's Wednesday.
Well, the bass are playing and things are happening, so you're talking over that.
Yeah,
so
and you're in that space and the sound's resonating and everything.
Right,
so
exactly.
I thought it'd be fun to just talk maybe just the origins of the Gage shop, like when it got started and
okay. I came down to New York City in 1976.
Yeah.
And to study with Dave Holland. And he had been up. I'd been at the University of Massachusetts, studied with Max Roach and Reggie Workman. I tried to get Dave Holland to come to UMass, but he was not interested in that. He had a lot of gigs going on. He moved to New York, and I decided, well, if I want to study with Dave, I better go to New York.
Yeah.
And I got a job doing various things down there. One thing was driving a cab, for example.
Oh, really?
And Chuck Traeger, who was working on my bass at the time, I asked him if he needed anybody. He said, sure, come on down March 15th.
Okay.
And I went down there March 16th, finally, in 1977. Mm-hmm. And so I worked with Chuck. And I worked there for actually only 6 months.
Really?
Yeah. And learned a lot from Chuck. Chuck was a sound expert. He's passed away, I don't know if you know that. He passed away a few months ago.
Well, he wrote that book, the optimal setup.
Optimal setup, book. And I met a lot of people, learned a lot, and fell in love with the idea of working on instruments. I always loved my bass. When I got my first string bass, I was just telling Glenn Moore this. I bought it, and I just sat in a room and looked at it for an hour.
Oh, really?
Looking at the shapes and smelling it and singing. Fell in love right there with just the instrument itself. Never mind. So I worked there, and one thing turned to another, and I worked a lot in Chuck's. I was working 7 days a week, and after a while, I thought I'd give playing a try again. At any rate, I moved down to now the Tribeca area in a big loft, and Mike Moore had a bunch of basses, and he asked me if I wanted to work on these basses. So I said, sure, I'll work on them. So he gave me 7 basses of his to work on, and I got enough equipment to work on them. That's how I really started. In that fall of '78, I incorporated David Gage string instruments.
Okay, so '78 was when that incorporated.
Yeah,
okay,
in November. And one thing led to the other. I mean, I was in 113 Chamber Street then. And Judy, my wife, and I were living there. And when we had our first daughter, had our first child, we moved in '83 to Reed Street, which is right around the corner.
Okay.
Which is all down.
Okay.
It was now Tribeca. Then it was just, I think it's called the Financial District still.
Okay. What was that like living in New York, like in the late '70s? At that point, I'm just thinking of like TV shows I was seeing.
Well, that's a good, excellent question because it was Ford to New York, drop dead.
Yeah.
And nobody wanted to be in New York. Nobody liked New York. New York had a hugely bad reputation, and taxi driver.
That's what
And there was a lot of crack cocaine, a lot of things going on. And the city had no money, and there were potholes, and it was falling apart. And nobody wanted to float a bond issue. No one would invest in New York City.
Yeah.
And so it was actually a great time to be in New York, to tell you the truth, because it was inexpensive.
Yeah.
Chuck says making $2 an hour.
Really?
And I was still could live, on that. You can get an apartment for $80.
Wow.
And so, in fact, our loft where we now live was a shop. It was going for $300 a month rent, and that's of like 1,800 square feet.
How times have changed.
How times have changed. What people were paying before, there were a lot of electronics stores and things like that. Down where the World Trade Center was just being completed, actually. The landscaping was just being completed down there. And so I said, $300, that's really a little too much. I was going through my budget, and we said to the guy, no, we really can't afford it. And so he called me back that night and said, how about $240? That was the economic climate. So it's changed a lot.
Wow.
Now Tribeca is Tribeca, and New York Film Festival, Tribeca Film Festival, De Niro, and everybody's down there. And these lofts are going for millions of dollars. So unfortunately, we never bought our shop space. We never were able to quite get the money for the whole building, but another around the area. But we do rent there now. So we're down on Walker Street is a store.
Okay.
It's not far from Reed Street where I live.
Okay.
And that's how it started. I don't know if that's probably a long-winded way.
No, it's great to hear. And like, I've had my Gage case and flown I don't know how many times with that. And like, obviously, like, made such a pivotal part of the double bass world.
Right.
And like maybe just like what, it was this, just you and Judy starting this thing, right? Like, how did it evolve into like what eventually became with your people working for you, and just how did the business evolve?
That's a great question. Another great question, because I realized that I want that working with your hands, it's going to be difficult to be 80 years old, 75 years old, and be able to do that. Now I'm 67. It's already harder to do that, but it's fine. It's great. But I realized that I needed something else to fortify the business financially, and so I did the stupid thing of I started making trunks first. That was the first idea. And trunks are not, no thanks product, because if everything goes well, nobody says anything.
Right, exactly.
If something goes wrong in your trunk, everybody talks about it. But and it's a lot of effort to make and ship them and do that. But it was the first product. It's not exactly a hula hoop.
Sure.
Sure. But so that was the first thing, and so started the trend of making products, making things like that. And so this is like almost 3 prongs. That's the product thing started there. And I met Mike Weatherly, who's from New Mexico. He was a bass player. He was a client of mine, and he had done some work on his own. He made his own sound post for his own bass, did some impressive work, and I needed some help. So I asked him if he wanted to work, and he did. And so he started working with me. That was my first employee, Mike Weatherly.
Okay.
New Mexico. Okay. And that sort of grew from there. And being in the other 3 prongs, I said, being in New York City, you meet everybody.
Yeah.
The Philharmonic, the jazz guys, everybody, the rock guys, and also fortunately, string bass became very popular in rock and roll and country music. And Bob Dylan's a string bass player, Tony Garnier, who's a good friend, and so you meet all these people, and so that expedites the progress of meeting people and growth.
Yeah.
And also, if I had a product like a trunk or later on pickups, I could get it right to the right people immediately, and they could say yes or no and do product testing essentially in the field, testing. And so that was I was really fortunate, and then getting a great employee and being in New York City.
Yeah.
And then Ned Steinberger, who was very famous in the electric bass and electric guitar world. He actually got a design award for the decade of the top designer of the 70s. He did it with the Steinberger guitar, Steinberger bass. It's a graphite instrument, the first one to use graphite. He called me up and said he's making a stand-up, a stick bass essentially, upright electric. And he's working on it tonight. He wanted to ask some questions. We came down and we immediately became good friends, and he talked about his product. Out of this spun, I said, well, this idea here would really work well.
Yeah.
On string bass, so we adapted to that, and we worked a long time. We came up with the realist pickup, and that's a whole other line of ours. That really kicked off the product line of that.
Well, and that was like a revolutionary product when that came out. I mean, I think like how many bassists I've seen with realist pickups, and I've had basses of my own with realists, and the various schools that I taught at. So
we were very lucky. We were very fortunate. It was like it would be hard to duplicate that kind of success in a way, because it was just like a hit record.
Yeah, right.
And everything just worked together. And in that project, all of problem solving would always be, usually you solve a problem, but you create another one in any design. So it's always a matter of kind of finding a way to have the complications less, the simplicity more. But not only that, just the solutions don't create more problems. If they do, the problems are small. It's always that kind of compromise.
Right.
In this, everything, when we try to get a problem, it would also help somewhere else. If you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I see that. I mean, like a lot of what you've done in the product line, it seems it's like solving solutions for bass players, whether it's the trunk or then the realist pickup, or then like working with like travel basses and that sort of thing.
That's actually maybe, in fact, our first product was done in our shop, handmade. We made probably about 30 stick basses.
Yeah.
Which Bob Cranshaw had one, and we've had but that was a lot of labor for that. But we never did have that produced for us for a factory or whatever. And then we have now the Czechies, we have different things. I go a lot to Europe. We go to the NAMM show. We have a manufacturer in Czech Republic for the Czechies.
Okay.
We also now have a realist violin, which the pickup is integrated inside the violin, and that's made for us. The violin's made for us in Romania.
Is that integrated into the bridge, or how does that
into the body?
Into the body itself.
Yeah, there's a little trap door, if you will, underneath the bass foot.
Okay.
Underneath the E foot, that side, the lower side, same side that the realist bass pickup goes on. Underneath there's a little trap door with a pickup, very similar to the miniature version of that.
Right, okay.
And we have a volume control and a jack. And if you look at the violin from a distance, or not even a distance, if you look at the violin, you think it is a totally acoustical violin.
Okay.
That it's supposed to look like an acoustical violin.
Yeah.
So we were hoping that it's been not an easy sell. I thought this is a no-brainer. People are going to love it. But the classical world is intimidating and also, I think, threatening. Threatening is what I want to use for people, particularly violin dealers, to conceive of electronics with acoustical instruments.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, what's happening to our world? Like, look who moved down the block. We have to deal with this. Look who's living in our neighborhood now. And I would bring it to like a violin convention or pickup, and the guy would look at it. He said that a couple people said, this is what I have to look forward to from, because these people, look what you created a monster here. What are you doing? That was disliked.
Yeah.
Very, very conspicuously disliked.
Well, that's like the sort of just the conservative nature of the violin world as contrast with the bass world, right? Which is a lot more open-minded.
But now that's changing tremendously. Well, the bass in general is open-minded because the bass has so many different shapes.
Yeah.
There's so many different, Gary Carr was talking about that last night. Did you hear him?
Yeah.
Just about, he said the cello or whatever. And
right.
They haven't changed for centuries, and the bass is always changing. It's always sort of the guy who C extensions and shapes. But the violin, it's true that. But kids are coming out of school now, great players playing better than ever, and the work is not there. And so they're making their own work. And they play in New York City called Poisson Rouge that plays a lot of, it's like almost hybrid musics of classical jazz and a lot of Mideast music.
Okay.
A lot of groups are coming out. Great players who play this kind of music. Robert Black just walked by.
Yeah.
That kind
Speaking of somebody who does, exactly.
It's straight in cue, but he's the bass version of that. Just a lot of people play with it. He would play Poisson Rouge. Robert Black, a wonderful player. As you know him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so this has been a great convention. They just walk by all our idols. Also, I'm a fan, really, I'm a bass player originally and a fan of bass, but I'm a groupie.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell people, actually, describe me simply, I'm the most sophisticated groupie in the world.
And a supporter of the bass. I mean, like sponsoring different events, and you've been involved with the ISB for so long, and 2 stints on the board. You were mentioning,
Yeah, second time my fault.
Right. Careful what you volunteer for.
Yeah, it was great. It's been great, and people on the board have been just being with us with the level of people on the board is fantastic.
Yeah, and being part of just the whole kind of bass revolution of the last few decades.
That's right. It's exciting. It really is an honor and exciting, and it's really thrilled to be part of all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the C extension, for example. I mean, back in the 70s, the C extension was, what's this?
Right.
And now there are 30 different kinds of C extensions.
Yeah.
Really well made.
Yeah.
All one better than the other, with all kinds of ideas of adjustable tuning with the gates and, really clever ideas. And so a lot of people are jumping in. It's as if there was $1 million in it.
Yeah, right.
People, it's all about love. Our people really love the instrument, love the music.
Yeah.
I think it's a challenge of doing it.
Yeah, it is all about love, though.
Yeah.
Bass love, and it's fascinating. I mean, the C extension is a great example, just to see from not used to then Stenholm type models and the stick to now you look around, and it's just it's unbelievable what's happening.
That's true. Bob Stenholm, I don't know if you knew him or not. He lived to be late 90s, and he was very vital up to the end. Mm-hmm. And he was a great guy. But what he did for that C extension is really so clever. The whole thing is just, I mean, now people don't want it, but just wait a few years.
But that was a revolution when that happened. I mean, just being able to do,
Oh, absolutely.
Do that. Yeah.
So much of a revolution, I think people realized it.
Yeah.
But that's... And there's an example where, I hate to say classical music is not, classical music is very adventurous in a lot of ways, particularly the bass world.
Yeah.
It always is, as Gary Carr said, but I mean, that C extension was really accepted by the classical world. Mm-hmm. And it was really an odd thing to be accepted, but totally. Yeah. But of course, bass were always thinking of the odd guy out.
Right.
I mean,
Of course, we would be the ones who would like something. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Well, David, just congratulations on everything you've done. I mean, it's been you've had a big impact on me and so many other bass players, and you're somebody I've been. I can't believe we haven't sat down and done this before. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for it's been an honor. Thank you. It's been fun.
Cool.
Well, thanks again for chatting, David. A person like David, his time is so valuable at a convention like this, so I really appreciate you taking the time to chat. And check out the Gage shop, davidgage.com. See what they've got in terms of basses, in terms of gear, bows. They have a wonderful selection. And thanks, David, for everything you do for the bass community. This is another in a series of ISB-related coverage. ContrabassConversations.com/ISB will take you to all the coverage that we're doing for these next several weeks and going back in time and going forward in the future. So just remember that URL. It's a good way to connect with the coverage for this event. And we'll be doing coverage of more events. I love having the opportunity to travel around like I'm able to do, like I'm so fortunate to be able to do right now, and bring events like the International Society of Bass Convention to people that just can't get there. Maybe you're in New Zealand, maybe you're in South America, maybe you're in Africa. We have listeners all across the world, and I know it's not possible for everybody to get to an event like this. I'd love to see everybody at an event like this, and it was wonderful to connect with the 1,500 people that were at this event, but being able to record and bring you this content is a real privilege for me, and I hope a benefit for the bass community. So I appreciate you listening to this, and you can continue to benefit this bass community and this show by sharing this out. Share this in the app if you're listening on our Contrabass Conversations app, which has hopefully been redesigned at this point. Or if you're listening on your phone using your podcast app or however you listen to podcasts, just hit the share button, share it on Facebook, share it on Twitter. No big deal, but it helps the show a lot. And I'd also love to hear from you. Feedback at ContrabassConversations.com. Let me know what you want to hear more of, less of, whatever on the show. Do you have a guest idea? Let me know. That's how I get my ideas for this show, and I really would appreciate it. And I appreciate you listening, and I can't wait to bring you more ISB coverage as we continue this journey of life on the low end of the spectrum.